Hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible Verse by Verse, a plain and simple study of the entire Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. Currently we are in Judges, and we're studying chapters 6 through 8. We're going to focus on chapters 7 tonight. This is the story of Gideon. And he is a very interesting character because he starts off as so insecure, and God literally had to strengthen him and say, I am with you. And remember, Gideon is getting ready to go to war with an extremely large number of soldiers right here. And God is going to use Gideon to completely destroy this army with just a few men. So let's get into it and see how God does that. Judges chapter 7. We've already saw how God has prepared Gideon. So verse 1 says, Jerubbaal, and that is Gideon, and everyone who was with him got up early and camped beside the spring of Harod. And the camp of Midian was north of them, below the hill of Moreh in the valley. The Lord said to Gideon, you have too many people for me to hand the Midianites over to you, or else Israel might brag, I did it myself. Now, announce in the presence of the people, whoever is fearful and trembling may turn back and leave Mount Gilead. So 22,000 of the people turned back, but 10,000 remained. Now, this is amazing because he had this kind of large army, right? Over 30,000 soldiers, and God says, that's too many for me to work a battle here. And so he says, okay, anybody that's afraid. Now, keep this in mind. Remember, all of them virtually kind of was afraid. They had been under the heel of the Midianites for a number of years because of their sin. So mentally, the nation was beat down. So on top of that, when God says go to war, it was enough when God says, okay, I'm going to go to war. I got at least 30,000. God says, oh, that's too many. And now he's getting ready to, no. You got way too many for people. And this would make this story fascinating because it shows you the power of God, right? That through if God has called you, he's going to empower you, okay? He's going to equip you. So the lesson is don't move without God, and certainly don't take up on something unless God, you know that God has called you. But so 22,000 of these people turned back. But then he says 10,000 remain. Then the Lord said to Gideon, verse 4, there are still too many people. Take them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. If I say to you, this one can go with you, he can go. But if I say about anyone, this one cannot go with you, he cannot go. So he brought the people down to the water, and the Lord said to Gideon, separate everyone who laps water with his tongue like a dog. Do the same with everyone who kneels to drink. And the number of those who lap with their hands to their mouth was 300 men, and all the rest of the people knelt to drink water. The Lord said to Gideon, I will deliver you with the 300 men who lap, and the hands who lapped, and I'm sorry, verse 7 again. The Lord said to Gideon, I will deliver to you with the 300 men who lap with their hands the Midianites over to you, but everyone else is to go home. So Gideon sent all of the Israelites to their tent, but kept the 300 who took the people's provisions and their trumpets. The camp of Midian was below him in the valley. Let me say this because I oftentimes I've always thought, could a person have known which way to have drunk the water? Now, those who kind of got on their knees and lapped versus those who scooped the water up. And those are the ones that God chose. Now, let me just say that I think it was all the grace of God. And as I said, in other words, you can't base the ones who lap based upon a character trait or not. In other words, you can't judge them on that. It was simply all God's grace in the first place. That God chose the ones who drunk from their hands. Okay. All right, verse 9. That night the Lord said to him, "Get up and go to the camp, for I have given it to your hands." And so that right there is the statement. And remember, it is all about God's grace and power on their lives. Verse 10. But if you are afraid to go to the camp, go with Purah, your servant. And listen to what they say, and then you will be strengthened to go to the camp. So he went with Purah, his servant, to the outpost of the troops who were in the camp. Now the Midianites, Amalekites, and the Quadites had settled down in the valley like a swarm of locusts. Now keep this in mind. Look how large this thing is, like a swarm of locusts. And their camels were as innumerable as the sand on the seashore. When Gideon arrived, there was a man telling his friend about a dream. He said, "Listen, I had a dream. A loaf of barley bread came tumbling to the Midianite camp and struck a tent, and it fell. And the loaf turned the tent upside down, so it collapsed." His friend answered, "This is nothing less than the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, the Israelite. God has handed an entire Midian camp over to him." So God strengthens him even further by giving this person a dream about the victory that Gideon was getting ready to have. Verse 15. When Gideon heard their account of the dream of the interpretation, he bowed and worshipped. He returned to the Israelite camp and said, "Get up, for the Lord has handed the Midianite camp over to you." So now he is strengthening his faith. Verse 16. Now, by the way, notice God said, "If you're still afraid," which means he was afraid. Verse 16. Then he divided the 300 men into 3 companies and gave each of the men a trumpet in one hand and an empty pitcher with a torch inside it to the other. "Watch me," he said, "and do the same. When I come to the outpost of the camp, do as I do. When I and everyone with me blow our trumpets, you are also to blow your trumpets around the camp. Then you will say, for Yahweh, and for Gideon." Now, kind of interesting, the term "and Gideon." We'll kind of come back to that later. I don't know if that's, this seems to be sort of not the best statement here. He says, for Yahweh and for Gideon. Okay. At this point, it's nothing, but I think as we progress with the story of Gideon, you'll see why I'm making this point here. Verse 19. Gideon and 100 men who were with him went to the outpost of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch after the sentries had been stationed. They blew their trumpets and broke the pitchers that were in their hands. The 3 companies blew their trumpets and shattered their pitchers, and they held their torches in their left hand and their trumpets in their right hand, and shouted, "The sword of Yahweh and for Gideon." Each Israelite took his position around the camp, and the entire Midianite army fled, and they cried out as they ran. And when the Gideonite men blew their 300 trumpets, the Lord set the swords of each man in the army against the other. They fled to Beth Shittah in the direction of Zerah, as far as the border of Abel Mahala near Tabath. Then the men of Israel were called from Naphtali, Asher, and Manasseh, and they pursued the Midianites. And then Gideon sent messengers throughout the hill country of Ephraim with this message: "Come down to intercept the Midianites, to take control of the water courses ahead of them as far as Beth-barah and to Jordan." So all the men of Ephraim were called out, and they took control of the water courses as far as Beth-barah and the Jordan. They captured Oreb and Zeb, the two princes of Midian. They killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb and at the rock of Oreb, and Zereb at the winepress of Zerub, while they were pursuing the Midianites. And they brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon across the Jordan. All right, so you see this great army. Now we're going to see many of these victories here like this, how God is working these miracles through these men. Notice it was 300 men against, again, an entire army whose numbers is like the sand of the sea. Verse 1, chapter 8, verse 1, the men of Ephraim said to him, why have you done this to us, not called us when you went to fight against the Midianites? And they argued with him violently. So he said to them, what have I done now compared to you? Is not the gleaning of Ephraim better than the ventures of Abiezer? God handed over to you, over Bezir, the princes of Midian. What was I able to do compared to you? When he said this, their anger against him subsided. I'm not sure now why they were kind of angry at them. You know, that he didn't call them. In other words, they still got some of the bounty. They still got some of the glory. Verse 4. Gideon and his 300 men came to the Jordan and crossed it. They were exhausted but still in pursuit. He said to the men of Sakah, please give me some loaves of bread to the people who were following me, because they were exhausted, for I am pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, the king of Midian. The prince of Sakah asked, are Zebah and Zalmunna now in your hands, that we should give bread to you, to your army? Now, they're kind of saying, well, we don't see where you guys actually have won. And they were trying to hedge their bets that the Midianites would defeat them, or at the very least, they said, well, we just don't know who's going to win. So, verse 7, Gideon replied, very well, when the Lord has handed Zebah and Zalmunna over to me, I will trample your flesh on thorns and briars from the wilderness. And he went from there to Peniel and asked the same from them. And the men of Peniel answered just as the men of Sakah had answered. And he told the men of Peniel, when I return in peace, I will tear down this tower. In other words, all who are not with us, we're going to take vengeance on you. Verse 10. Now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Kharkov, and with them, with their armies, about 15,000 men, who were all those left of the entire army of the Gideonites. Those who had been killed were 120,000 warriors. Gideon traveled on the caravan route east of Nobah in the Jagwah, and attacked their armies while the armies was unsuspecting. Zebah and Zalmunna fled, and he pursued them. He captured those two kings of Midian and routed the entire army. Gideon, son of Joash, returned from battle by the ascent of Heres. He captured a youth from the men of Sakah and interrogated him. And the youth wrote down for him the names of 77 princes and elders of Sakah. Then he went to the men of Sakah and said, here are Zebah and Zalmunna. You taunted me about them, saying, are Zebah and Zalmunna, sorry about these butchering these names again, Zalmunna, now in your power that we should give bread to your exalted men? So he took the elders of the city, and he took some of the thorns and briars from the wilderness, and he disciplined the men of Sakah with them. And he tore down the tower of Peniel and killed the men of the city. He asked Zebah and Manu, what kind of men did you kill at Tabor? They were like you, he said. Each resembled the king. Each resembled the son of a king. So he said, they were my brothers, the son of my mother, and if the Lord lived, if you had let them live, I would not have killed you. And he said to Jephthah, his firstborn, get up and kill them. The youth did not draw his sword, for he was afraid, because he was still a youth. And Zubah and Manuna said, get up and kill us yourself, for a man is judged by his strength. So Gideon got up and killed Zubah and Zalmunna, and took the crescent ornaments that were on their necks and from their camels. Verse 22. So then the Israelites said to Gideon, rule over us, you as well as your son and your grandsons, for you delivered us from the power of the Midianites. But Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, and my sons will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. Then he said to them, let us make a request of you. Everyone give me an earring and his plunder. Now the enemy had gold earrings because they were Ishmaelites. They said, we agree to give them. So they spread out a mantle, and everyone threw an earring from the plunder on it. The weight of the gold earrings he requested was about 43 pounds of gold, in addition to the crescent ornaments and the ear pendants and the purple garments of the kings of the Midian, and the chains on their necks of their camels. Verse 27. Gideon made an ephod from all. Gideon made an ephod from all this and put it on in Ophrah, his hometown. Then all of Israel prostituted themselves with it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his household. So this is kind of a foolish move from Gideon, okay, when he made the ephod, because first and foremost, only the priest was to make the word ephod, and that's why it became a snare. He shouldn't have made it in the first place. Verse 28. So Midian was subdued before the Israelites, and they were no longer a threat, and the land was peaceful 40 years during the days of Gideon. Jubal, that is Gideon, the son of Joash, went back to live at his house. Gideon had 70 sons, his own offspring, since he had many wives. Now again, we're going to see this pattern of wickedness and evilness, right? This, verse 31. His concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son, and he named him Abimelech. Then Gideon, son of Joash, died at the ripe old age and was buried in the tomb of his father Joash in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. Now, when Gideon died, the Israelites turned and prostituted themselves with the Baals, and they made Baal Berith and their gods. Let me read that again, verse 33. When Gideon died, the Israelites turned and prostituted themselves with the Baals and made Berith their god. And the Israelites did not remember the Lord their God, who had delivered them from the power of the enemies around them. They did not show kindness to the house of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, for all the good that he had done. Now again, this is just amazing, right? That again, you almost really understand why God judged them. But at the same time, you see how merciful God is, that after all of this, right, they are repeatedly going through this cycle of sin here. Now you may say, why? The sinful nature, one. Why are they doing it when God repeatedly, shows himself to them? It's even beyond belief. All right, guys. Chapter 9 in our next study. I'll see you then.